Hi, it's Latanya McElroy, your Vice President of Human Resources here at BCS. And I'm here again. I want to provide a brief overview of training on the interviewing process. The purpose of this training is to provide supervisors and managers with the tools they need to avoid the danger zones of hiring or interviewing. And I want to make sure that you're ready and confident in your ability to record objective notes and make objective decisions regarding the interviewing process. Also, at the end of this video, I will make sure that you are aware of the requirements as a supervisor or manager that you have specifically to BCS. So please come along with me as we take this ride. It's going to be about a 20-minute video, and I hope that you'll appreciate the time we're taking to do this today. Introduction. Hiring the best candidate for each and every job is a goal of all employers. A critical part of the hiring process is the personal interview. While you as an interviewer would like to have all of the information you can obtain from a candidate, you must avoid asking any questions that may be considered discriminatory. As you are aware, decades ago, many federal laws and also some state laws passed that pertain to the questions an interviewer can ask. Yet, job candidates today might still be asked questions that are illegal. The costs for an employer to defend itself against a claim of illegal employment discrimination are significant. Accordingly, you as a hiring manager need to know how to conduct lawful interviews. This presentation provides that knowledge. These are the 4 areas we'll discuss today, and I hope that you'll take the time to complete the entire video, as all of these areas are important. You'd be surprised at the number of laws that pertain to interview questions. I'm just going to give you a minute to read over these. And this is just a few of them. There's actually another page. And there are also case precedents, case law that governs how we handle things. So there are even other laws that pertain to this. I'm going to turn the page and you'll see there are more. Everything from GINA to the Child Support Enforcement Amendments Act. So it's very important that you're familiar with the do's and don'ts. I don't expect you to know what all of these laws say, but I do expect you to know what you can and can't ask during an interview, which is based on these laws. If you ever have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out. What to ask and not ask. I'm going to go over a few slides that go over the do's and don'ts. So instead of regarding age, asking when did you graduate or when did you intend to retire, you might ask, do you meet the minimum age requirements for the job, or can you supply transcripts of your education? What about disability? Instead of asking, do you have a disability, or have you ever filed a workers' compensation claim, or do you have a history of drug or alcohol abuse, or questions like that, you can ask, after reviewing the job description, can you perform the duties listed in the job description with or without accommodation? And in that case, you're going to specifically focus on the essential job duties and responsibilities. If a worker has an obvious disability that you can see or observe, or reveals a hidden disability, you may ask the applicant to describe or demonstrate how he or she would perform the job duties with accommodations or with that disability. You must provide reasonable accommodation to candidates who have disability. And reasonable accommodation can be discussed with Human Resources to clarify what that exactly means. Well, obviously, questions about race during an interview are prohibited. However, race is often legitimately needed for your affirmative action purposes or to track applicant flow, and Human Resources normally collects that data. One way to get that data is and guard against discriminatory selection is for us to use the form EEO1, which allows the person to voluntarily self-identify. So we never have to ask this question or questions relating to this during the interview. All of that information is collected in the application process and is not used in the process of making an employment selection. Race should never be discussed. In most cases, an employee who's applying for a position with BCS would never, ever, ever be asked any questions regarding religion because we don't have a bona fide occupational qualification for that. We're not hiring a clergy person or someone to work at a religious establishment. Therefore, religion should never be mentioned during a job interview. Surprisingly, common questions come up about marital status, and actually sex or marital status can't be discussed. Instead of asking, are you married, or when do you plan to start a family, or do you have children, You can ask, are you available to travel frequently? Or can you work overtime with no notice? Can you work evenings and weekends? Can we check references or do a background check? Are there other names we should look under? So we never ask, do you have a married or maiden name? Or any question that would reveal the makeup of the family or the marital status. Never ask questions regarding citizenship, the country of origin, where the accent came from, the nationality of the last name, or if they have a visa that expires. If the person is hired, then after an offer of employment has been made, we ask for them to provide the documentation that proves their eligibility to work in the United States. So none of the other information is relevant until we are at that process. It's an honor to hire a veteran, but in times asking questions regarding the military can be tricky. We shouldn't ask a person to provide the status of their military discharge, or will they miss work to perform military service, such as someone who's enlisted in a Guard or National Guard service. So what can you ask? You can ask them about their experience and what they gained from their experience in the uniformed service. That would be relevant to the job. But obviously with military leave, we get into some other issues, and you can always discuss questions regarding that with human resources. As you all know, appearance is one of those things that is really a part of your first impression, and obviously can become the subject of conversation if we're not careful. So for example, if someone's wearing something that has some religious reference, or even a garment that is a part of their faith or religion, or maybe there are even cultural issues or variations in the person's appearance, how they're wearing their hair, or different things like that. What do you do? Can that be discussed? Best practice is not to make any of that the subject of conversation or to ask questions, as it could be a religious or cultural variation that's protected by law. A thorough background check is conducted for all candidates. There's no reason to ask if a person's been arrested or had any convictions, because all of that is covered in the application and background screening process. If a person asks questions specifically to the interviewer regarding whether or not a conviction or a felony or a misdemeanor on their record would have an impact on their employment, you would refer them to human resources. If you have any further questions on this area, please don't hesitate to reach out. So all of this time you might have been thinking, I would never ask any of those questions. I know that, but I want to just share a little bit of information regarding volunteered information. What if you never ask the question, but a somewhat talkative interviewer or something happens in the turn of the conversation happens and someone mentions something that's illegal? I mean, even when you ask only legal questions, this can happen. For example, an applicant may disclose that she is pregnant or will need time off for childbirth if she is hired. The best way to handle situations in which information is disclosed to you that would normally be protected is to not make any note of it on any of your notes. Just as you should ask only job-related questions, you want to disregard any information that's not job-related and avoid including that information in your decision and in your notes. Consistency is key in interviewing. In order to make a fair decision, you are going to need to follow some standard of questions with your interview, some standard of structure with that process. I know that it's easy to just conduct an interview informally. However, it's best practice to be consistent with how the interviews are conducted and the structure. Doing this will help us to protect you and our organization, and will ensure that you're treating all candidates equally and fairly. It's really good to do that and avoid complaints of illegal discrimination. So if you have an interview and you consistently ask the same questions, you have an opportunity to document those responses and ratings so that in the event that the decision for employment is questioned, we'll always have that information to refer back to. What about interview biases and how can they be avoided? Here are the ones to avoid. Stereotyping is where we broad brush. We think that because of a certain image or a certain thing, the person fits into a certain category. We all know what that is. We want to avoid stereotyping. We want to actually avoid first impression bias. It is hard at times to get over the first impression, but we must give the interviewer an opportunity, the interviewee an opportunity to get to know them, to see how they would perform under certain pressure, and ask behavioral questions to dig in. And after they've warmed up, you might see a totally different side of the candidate. Avoid the horns effect. The horns effect is when there's one thing that we don't like. It could even be not relevant to the job, but we broad brush the person with their whole entire candidacy with that one item that we don't like. The halo effect is the same. We find an item that's wow, and we broad brush and overlook negativities or deficiencies in other areas because of this one great outstanding thing. The similarity bias is, they're kind of like me. We hit it off immediately. And obviously, history has shown that's not necessarily going to prove that the candidate is the best candidate for the job. Avoid the intuition effect. And I know this is very common for those who are really confident in themselves as an interviewer. Maybe because they've been doing it for so long, it's sort of like that sixth sense, that gut instinct. But statistics show that that is not the fairest way to make a hiring decision. You should make the decision based on objective facts, the candidate's qualifications, and things that you can substantiate with those types of items. If you have any questions regarding these biases or need more information, I can provide that information to you. Don't hesitate to reach out. To summarize, all of these laws basically tell us that we as an employer may not ask questions focused on age, disability, race, religion, sex, marital status, national origin, arrests, or convictions. If a candidate volunteers that information, we're to ignore the information and not to make any note of it. And we are to be consistent, asking all the candidates for a position the same, similar questions, and using a structured interview process. So here are the BCS specific do's and don'ts. Do notify HR of all scheduled interviews and/or schedule them through human resources. We have to document all interviews. Do use HR-approved interview questions and structure. That's to protect all of us, to make sure we're all following the same guidelines. Do objectively document all interviews. Make sure you're making only objective notes that aren't opinionated, but are based on facts. Do submit final notes from all interviews to human resources. Those will be documented for our file and held in case of an event or in the event that we need those to protect ourselves in cases. Do interview in a safe place in such a way that protects you and the candidate. Do submit final recommendations to HR for higher offers to be made through our corporate office. We'll make sure that you have the final details and that you're able to make contact with the candidate before the higher offer is sent. Don't make an offer to the candidate without approval or clearance through human resources. Don't promise the candidate a pay rate or a salary without approval. Typically, we'll provide you with a range if you need to provide that to the candidate. Don't break the law regarding legal interview questions, but we know you won't do that. Don't make decisions on gut instinct that you can't substantiate in your interview ratings or your notes or with the candidate's qualifications. And finally, don't fall subject to biases. It's easy to do, but those can be avoided. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope that you'll let us know if you have any questions, because honestly, we're here to help. Not here to hinder, but to support you and to make sure you have all the tools you need to be an outstanding interviewer and manager. Thank you so much.